Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome back to another exciting, awful, wonderful, creepy, horrible, maybe even spooky episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Ghoul. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, before we get into today's horrifying topic, I want to do a bit of housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and dirty. Or maybe is it clean? We don't know because it's Halloween. So make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And finally, if you listen to this on Spotify on your mobile phone, don't forget to follow me on Spotify and don't forget to leave a star rating. If you can do all three things at the beginning of this episode, I will be eternally grateful. So it is spooky season. This is week 1. This is the beginning of Halloween. And I am incredibly excited and overjoyed. I had so much fun doing this last year. And so I can't wait to get into it this year. Today, we're going to be looking at Critters 2, the main course. I looked at Critters 1 last year. I absolutely loved and adored this movie. I absolutely fell in love. So I had to do the sequel again for this Halloween. For anybody that doesn't know, before we get into today's topic, I've got to do a bit of sort of introductions and how things are going to work. So for anybody who's not in the know, last year I looked into some horror B movies and actually had a fantastic time. Those movies were, if anybody is interested, by all means go back and check them out. I looked at the first Critters for week 1. Week 2, I looked at Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That was an absolute wonderful joy and treat. Then for week 3, I looked at The Stuff. That is still one of my favourite all-time, like top tier favorite B tier horror movies I've ever watched. The Stuff, I recommend it. It's incredible. And finally, the last week of Halloween, I looked at The Cottage from 2008. That, out of all the movies that I watched and reviewed, that was the most successful horror Halloween movie I've ever looked at on the podcast, not just on YouTube. But on YouTube, it's got like 63 views. On Spotify, it's quite high as well. And I'm glad because that movie is, in my opinion, an underrated gem. It's a horror comedy, but it's great. It's incredibly British. It's got Andy Serkis in it. It's incredible. And it was one of those treats to watch that movie, to put it out there, people to go out and listen to my review, and then people went to go and watch it, and then so many people came back to me and said, "Oh, I watched The Cottage. It was incredible. I can't believe I never watched it before." You know, and it was an absolute treat and joy. So whenever that happens, whenever I look into a movie, if anybody, again, listen to this, goes off and watches Critters because whatever I say today, or they want to go back and check my review out for Critters 1, and you decide to watch the movie, please do let me know because I love hearing that kind of stuff. It's the incredible feeling and a great experience. But yeah, so that is kind of what I did last year. This year it's going to be the same. I'm not going to say what the topics are or when. You'll find out as the weeks go on, but I've got 4 weeks, four movies, and I've done a bit of a bit of old school and maybe a bit of newer school. All B movies, all low budget, all sort of, cult classics. And I think, the ones I've chosen this year, they're a bit different. They're all a bit different. They're all doing something different, but they all should be very fun. They might be, they might not be, but that is kind of the idea and topic. Just have a bit of fun this Halloween. Also, one thing I want to mention is the fact of, because it's Halloween season, it's a special time of year, but also the fact of, it's going to be some swears, basically. I try my best in all my reviews to kind of pull back on the swears and use other sort of words. So instead of saying the F word, I say fudge, or damn it and things like that. That's just me personally. I don't really like to swear so much on the podcast, but I'm like to let go at Halloween because you have to. When you watch movies like this, you've got to let go. So just want to give you some warnings. If you listen to this in the car, on the radio, or if the kids are in the back, or you're doing washing and the kids are playing, I'd rather just give you a warning that it's not guaranteed, but there might be a potentiality of a few swears here and there. So just to let you know, listen at your own risk if there's kids about. there will be some swears, but again, it's Halloween. You can't help not have a bit of tomfoolery and a bit of skullduggery, rude words, shall we say? So yeah, I just want to give you a bit of a warning there, but I am very much excited to looking into this movie. I originally had planned to cover Critters before Halloween, and that I could do new things for Halloween, but because I was so busy this year, I figured, you know what, I'm just going to do it for Halloween, and it'll be great. It'll be like a yearly tradition. So I'll review Critters 2 this year. The next Halloween, I'll do Critters 3, and then we'll keep going until the very last Critters movie, which I think the last one was 2019. So they're still making them. And as long as they make them, I'm going to keep watching them because I love this series. I've heard things that they get worse as they go on, and that the second movie that we're going to watch today is apparently the best one. But still, fingers crossed, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. So, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? So this is the synopsis of the movie, and I love this synopsis. It's a great synopsis. IMDb have come in clutch once again. So, the flesh-eating furballs from outer space are back for a second outing, and this time it's an even bigger problem as the nearby community of Grover's Bend become the latest course. It's just as well those bounty hunting heroes are back to save the day, but as the residents are already dropping by the mouthful, it seems as if this time the critters have won. Too bad. So thank you, IMDb, for that. As for the cast, we have Scott Grimes back as Brad, Leanne Curtis as Megan, Terrence Mann as Ugg, Don Keith Opper plays Charlie, or as Don Opper. Cynthia Garris is Zanti, Al Stevenson as the bus driver, Tom Hodgins as Wesley, Douglas Rowe as Quigley, Lindsay Parker as Cindy, Herta Wave as Nana, Sam Anderson as Mr. Morgan, and Lin Shan as Sal. So that is your cast. As for the production, so not very much I could find on the production. I've got some things here and there that I can add in here, but the production is kind of very small that I could find. Garris got the chance to direct after having worked for Steven Spielberg on the television series Amazing Stories as a screenwriter. Garris initially turned down the offer to direct, but later accepted, citing that he was a big fan of the first movie and wanted to make the sequel a more scary film than the first. The Chidado brothers, who served as special effects artists on the first film, returned to create the titular creatures, creating over 50 puppets for the film. The film was shot in Valencia, Santa Clarita, a part of the Los Angeles metropolitan area. As for the release, the film was released in theaters in the United States by New Line Cinema in April 1988. It grossed $3.8 million at the box office and was the last film in the series to be released in theaters. As for the reception, Rotten Tomatoes reports that 38% of 13 surveyed critics gave the film a positive review. The average rating is about 4.7 out of 10. Film critic Roger Ebert gave the film a 1 out of 4 stars, saying it lacks all the style and sense of fun of the original Critters from 1986 and has no reason for discussion. Now, when it comes to these B horror movies, I don't tend to care about a Rotten Tomatoes score. Like, the movie could have a 1%, I wouldn't care less. These movies, the reason why they're B tier is they're cheaply budget. Some of them are cult classics, are incredible, and some of them are just good for being bad, are so bad that they're good. You know what I mean? And that is what you get with these films. Like I said this last year, and I'll re-say it this year for anybody who hasn't listened to last year's episodes. The reason why I love watching B movies is the fact of I am bored of modern horror. Modern horror is not scary anymore. It's not terrifying. It's badly done, badly written. The gimmicks are overdone and the tropes, and like nobody's really trying anything new. I think the last good, decent horror movie sort of comedy that I watched was Abigail this year, and I love that film. I thought it was actually fantastic, and I would love more movies from the Abigail series. It's good as a standalone, but it's the best horror movie I've seen in a very, very long time. It's fantastic. If you haven't watched Abigail, I highly recommend it. But that's the reason why I'm watching a lot of these older movies now, is because if modern films are disappointing me, I'm going back, and a lot of these B movies, they're not scary. Some of them are really, really good. Some of them are silly. Some of them are a bit janky. But you know what? That's what's special about them. And what you'll find with a lot of horror movies especially during like the 70s and 80s. I can't remember the exact details, but up until this point in movie making, there was a law in the United States that certain things you could and couldn't show in movies, like gore and violence and sex and stuff like that. I think that ban was lifted in the 70s, and that is why you see a lot of really grotesque and really sort of ultra violent and ultra sexual sort of movies in the 70s and 80s, because that ban was lifted, so that these directors that wanted to make movies like this, or even that they couldn't, now could. And they kind of like peacocks, they spread their wings and they could make, movies with titties and loads of bloods and violence and things like that. And that's why you have that renaissance of those sort of films. And they eventually started to peter out as you get up to sort of the sort of early 2000s, but it went for a long time, from like the 70s, 80s and 90s. I remember growing up, in the 2000s, watching movies from like the 90s, and you just get titties, butts and boobs and naked people and people doing it and all that kind of stuff, and sexy time and all this kind of stuff. And that's just kind of what you expected. You don't get that nowadays with a lot of movies. Like, you had it in the early 2000s, but eventually you stopped having that. And I'm not saying, boobs and all that make the movie great. No, I'm not saying that. But it's just more the fact of, you got that grotesque violence, you got that over-sexualization, you got all that kind of stuff. And again, just because you got it didn't mean the movie was great. But, these films, they actually tried something. They were inventive. They were creative. They tried new tropes, new things. They even invented new tropes that are still used today. Whereas you watch movies today, they're just trying to play it safe. It's not very creepy. It's not very scary. It's not, or the jump scares, you see them coming so much, or a lot of the jump scares are cheap. And I just want to go back to that time where, like, directors of these movies were like, what, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try something new. Jordan Peele, I think Jordan Peele, he's doing it really good. Like, I really loved Us. I haven't seen Nope yet. Get Out was fantastic as well. Like, these, like, psychological horrors, and they make you think, and you've got to properly focus on it. Great, fantastic sort of films. And again, I'm not. I do apologize going on a rant about horror movies, but I just feel like horror movies nowadays are no longer doing what they did. Back in the day, you'd get these fantastic, creative sort of movies. Not all good, not all great, but some were, they were fun times. Nowadays, it's very hard to find a decent horror movie nowadays. It's a bit of a shame, but that's why I like looking at these older films, because I'm just finding gems. I'm finding movies of like, this is great, this is incredible, I love it, and I'm enjoying it. But, thank you for coming to my TED Talk about horror films. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, before we probably get onto the review, is that this movie, the second film, was kind of, the reason why it was the only last film of the Critters series to go into theatres is because the sequel was, in a way, a flop. The reason being is the fact of Critters 1. So it was made for a budget of $3 million, right? Which is normal for the 80s, that's pretty standard. But at the box office, it made $13.2 million, which is incredible. It made back its money, made back its budget, and a bit of extra. And, for the 80s, this is pretty good, for, a B-tier, low-budget horror movie. So obviously, it calls for making a sequel. Sequel comes out. It was made for $4 million, so they put an extra $1 million into it, because again, the last one made back quite a bit of money. This film only made $3.8 million at the box office. So, although it did not gross as much as the original, and the sequel grossed only $3.8 million during its run in the theaters, it is the last installment in the series to be released in theaters, and it is followed by Critters 3 in 1991. And I just find that kind of interesting, because everybody I've asked about the Critters movies, they all say that Critters 2 is the best. It's the most fun, it's the most interesting, it's the most gory, it's the best one of the whole trilogy, or like the whole series. That is what everybody tells me. And that's why I don't listen to critics. I'm like, yeah, it might have flopped, but if everybody's telling me that the second one's really is better, and I had a fantastic time with the first Critters, I'm all here for it. You know what I mean? I'm ready for it. I don't care what the critics say. I'm going to go watch it. I'm going to give it a go and put my own sort of 2 cents in it, and I'm going to report back in a second about what I thought. But yeah, that's all she wrote really for the introduction. I'm excited. We're going to see if this movie is better than the first one, if it is as good as everybody says. If it isn't, we'll see. I'm going to go off now and watch the movie. In the meantime, by all means, if you want to stick around and wait for my review, which it comes in a couple seconds, then by all means, please do. If not, please, you can go and listen to my review of the first Critters and go watch Critters 1. If you'd like, by all means, pause it because, again, Critters 1 is a fantastic movie and deserves your time anyway. So if you haven't watched it, go back and watch the movie, listen to my review again, either on Spotify or on YouTube, and then come back and then listen to my thoughts and feelings on Critters 2. And I will catch you all in a minute. Right, so I've just finished watching Critters 2, and let me just start by saying I did like this movie. I did enjoy it. But, and there is a but here, this movie suffers from a bad case of sequelitis. Now, for anybody who's not a qualifying movie doctor, allow me to elaborate. Sequelitis is a thing that happens with sequels to movies where they try too hard to focus on other things or try something new instead of actually focusing on what made the first film good. In this case of Critters, the first thing that made the first movie great was the blood, was the gore, was basically it got going straight away. As soon as the critters crash land on Earth, you got a little bit of story, to set up the characters and why you should care about this small little family on this little farm. And then that was it. The critters were attacking, the bounty hunters were in, they were causing mayhem and carnage. And, it was just epic all the way through. And I loved it, and I thought it was fantastic. And wow. The problem with this movie is the fact of, because it's a sequel, it feels like it needs to explain everything. What I mean by that is the fact of, it's like, Brad's back from the last movie. A couple of years have passed. He's a lot older now, and now then we've got to set up this whole everything else, and we've got to introduce other characters, and I'm just like, well, okay, that's interesting, but you're spending too much time. I think the first death is not until 25 minutes into it. The first proper full death, in terms of actually seeing somebody getting somewhat eaten, is around about the 30-minute mark. And then the whole town don't actually see the critters, the krites, really until the 40-minute mark, to be honest. So, and this movie's only an hour and 25 minutes. So you've been watching for the majority of the time with not a lot of killing happening. Like I said, the actual critters themselves are not introduced fully, not in behind the shadows or anything like that, like fully actually seeing what everybody sees them until 40 minutes into the film. And that's kind of a bummer because I remember distinctly that the first movie got going very, very quickly. And it just feels like with this film, they were trying other things. They were trying new things. They was introducing characters that I didn't really care much for because I had a feeling that they would be eaten or that they would die soon. So like introduce them, but get it over done with. Like, hello, I'm Craig. Oh, hi, Craig. Craig's dead. Oh, bye, Craig. Okay, next person. You know what I mean? Like that's what I was kind of hoping for. Not of like, hi, Craig. And then I'm learning about Craig's life and what Craig does. And then Craig dies. I'm like, no. Introduce him, kill him off, done. Move on. Because that's what they did with in the last movie. What's his name now? What is his name? Billy Zane. He was in it. He was a love interest, getting sexy time, and then he got bit on the penis and he died. It was great, incredible death. But again, you know what I mean. I didn't need to know about the love interest, about the sisters. Love interest partner, whatever. Didn't need to know about it. It's just the fact of it was a setup. They was having their moment. He dies, great, and then it gets going, and bish bash bosh, it's great. That's the only problem I have with this movie, is that I really liked it and I enjoyed it, but it just took too long to get into actually the killing, into the gore, into the critters. It felt more of that it was a story about the people than it was about critters, and that was the only downside that I have about it. Apart from that, I do enjoy it. I when the killing comes and when there's blood and there's gore, it's all practical effects. It's quite rad. There's a really cool moment where near the end of the movie, all the krites come together in one big sort of fur ball, and they're rolling. It's like roly poly oly. yeah, people are running away from this like Indiana Jones style. One guy falls over and they just run over him, and then you get a bit of munching and crunching sort of sounds, and then the next shot is the giant ball of Kreitz moving away, and then this body's just been stripped, and it looks gory, it looks incredible. Like, I wanted more of that. That is probably the only biggest criticism I have about this movie, is I just wanted more killing. I expected in the sequel, it hyped me up, it gave me that idea looking at the poster that the sequel was going to be more of what was in the first one, but on a bigger scale. Now it's like Gremlins. Now we're focusing on the whole town, so everybody's eligible, everybody's up for being killed. And there were many moments where I'm sitting here, you'd see these little kids painting Easter eggs, and I think any moment one of these eggs are going to pop up, and they're like, is it going to be brave enough? Is it going to be one of them 70s, 80s horror movies where they just kill all the kids? I'm sitting there thinking, is that what they're going to do? Or, I'm like, in my mind, I'm trying to invent scenarios and graphic sort of things that these Kreitz, these creatures could do, because I wasn't seeing it. I wasn't seeing what I was expecting to see. You see a few people die, but not enough people die. I mean, that's the whole point. You watch these movies. You watch these movies for people get eaten, for people to get ripped apart, get to shreds. It doesn't happen enough here. Generally, this is kind of the best way I can explain it. It feels like the Kreitz, the critters, they come in, they get out the eggs, they go around looking for food, they end up not focusing on any of the humans. They go to sort of a knockoff version of Burger King, McDonald's, go into there, they start eating all the burgers and all that, and that is basically it. Like, a few people get eaten, but it's not as much as you would expect. It's mostly them just eating fast food, and it's the fast food in the end that kind of gets them killed, because, and again, spoilers, but the whole town basically realizes this and herds them away to this big sort of meat processing factory, and then blows them up in there, which it doesn't work. But again, that is kind of it, really, is that not enough people are being killed, but like, you see a few cows, wild cows being eaten. A dog dies in it, which was kind of horrific, because I was like, oh God, they killed a dog. So it feels like they're going to lose some points there for me. But yeah, there wasn't enough gore, in my opinion. I hate to say it, because a lot of people told me that the sequel was better than the first one. I disagree. I would much rather watch Critters than Critters 2. It's still a good film, and I feel like if you watch these movies back to back, like if you did Critters 1, Critters 2, I think you would probably enjoy Critters 2 a lot more, because again, it was straight after it. It's kind of moves on the story, but because it's been a year since I'd seen Critters, it's one of those where I just went in hoping, and it kind of a sort of a downer to myself, because I went in doing something that I don't usually do, which is I went in hoping for something, and I was disappointed because I didn't get it. And this is why I always say, like, whenever you go into a movie or video game, try not to go with any expectations. Just experience it for what it is. And for what it is and what it does, I like it. I was just hoping for more, in terms of blood and killing and death and all that. Like, again, that's the whole point of these films. But there were funny moments, like there were highlights. They were like the practical effects was incredible. You can tell the extra $1 million that they had went into the budget. You get to see some titties, which is great. Some pretty good boobs, to be honest. There was comedy as well. One thing that was my biggest favorite from the first movie was you had the two bounty hunters. They're back in it, and you had the one bounty hunter, Lee, who couldn't figure out what he wanted to look like, how he wanted to look like. And then Charlie comes back and he lands on Earth and he finds a Playboy in the middle of the field, which makes, to be honest, to anybody else would probably seem like silly, and probably like, why would there be a Playboy in the middle of nowhere? Obviously, the story sets up as to why it's there, but my mind was just like, yeah, Playboys just appear. We've all been down to the woods and found Playboys in the woods, or we went to school and somebody brought a Playboy in, or that sort of thing. Like, it all happened. It happens, or maybe it doesn't to you, but I remember it happening in school anyway. But Charlie finds like a Playboy, and Lee sees one of the women, one of the Playboy models, and instantly just transforms, and like breasts come out, breaks the uniform, boobs, like glamour, and like Charlie's like, oh. There was actually one great moment, and I really wished they went for it, because I think this is for New Line Cinema, and I'm sure it was New Line Cinema that did Nightmare on Elm Street. I've got to Google it now. Nightmare on Elm Street. Is it New Line Cinema? It is. Right. New Line Cinema did this movie. And New Line Cinema did Nightmare on Elm Street, and there is a moment where you see Charlie's running after Lee, and Lee's like in front of like a movie, like a blockbuster sort of thing, and he sees a cutout of Freddy or Krueger, and he's looking at it, and he started the transformation. I'm like, go for it, do it. That would be epic. That is the collaboration I didn't know I needed till I needed it. Freddy versus Jason versus the Critters. I need it. And I wish they went the whole hog and but was brave enough to get, to go for it, to really Robert England in to reprise his role as Freddy. And then even if it's just for a scene, it doesn't have to be for the whole movie. Even if it's just for a scene where Lee transforms into Freddy and he goes into an alleyway and he just rips these critters to shreds, and maybe he dies doing it, or maybe he doesn't die, and then he realizes, goes, you know what, I don't like it. This is not for me. Says bitch, you know what I mean, and then looks at the Playboy and turns back into the stunning Playboy model. I would have loved that. They don't do it though. But generally, when he saw it and he was transforming, you had Charlie being like, no, please, anything but that. And I'm like, yes, that. Charlie, shut up, get out of the way, let him do his thing. That would have been epic. It really would. It's a shame they didn't. They didn't go the full hog, but it would have been incredible if they did. That would have been a moment of like, you know what, 10 out of 10. I would watch this movie again and again and again, just for that moment to see it. But sadly they never did it. But like I said, there are upsides and downsides. There's not much in the way of the critters don't feel like much of a threat here. They're dangerous, but in the first movie they felt more dangerous. They felt more sort of terrifying. In this one, it felt like it was more played for laugh, for comedy. You learn a bit more about the crates, how they like to eat together, that they're like, it's like a hive mentality, that they all eat together sort of thing. So you learn a bit more lore. And again, me who personally loves lore and loves these sort of things, I really enjoyed it. But like, there were just moments where you could tell they went forwards and they pulled back. There was a moment where this young girl, she had one of the eggs. I'll talk about the story in a minute, but she has like an Easter egg, and it's not really an Easter egg. It's actually one of the eggs from the first movie, and it opens up while she's asleep, and you have this cry. You have the critter underneath her bed going back and forth, and there are a moment where like she puts her arm over, when she's asleep, and it goes for her fingers, but she pulls up at last minute, and then she puts her foot down, and the critter goes for her foot, but just before she goes for her foot, her dad walks in and stands on it. Again, it's a cool scene, but I thought to myself, go for it. If you, I don't want to see the little girl die, but like, if you're gonna go for it, go for it. And there were many moments like that where you'd think, oh, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that, and then they don't do it, and you're like, oh, that's not what I was expecting from critters. You know what I mean? It's like they were playing it too safe at times. And yeah, I think that's my only real sort of downer, is the fact of, even though it's good and I would recommend to watch Critters 1, Critters 2, the only real downer I have is that it just seems that they pull back in terms of the gore. Like, when it's there, it's great, but they just pull back on what made the first one so good. So I would, me personally, I say I would much rather watch the first Critters instead of this one. But if someone said to me, do you want to watch Critters 1, Critters 2 back to back, I'd be 100% for it. But I do prefer the first one. As for the story here, as I mentioned, Brad is back, played by Scott Grimes. Brad was in the first one as a young lad. I think he's about 2 or 3 years have passed since the last movie. So he's a bit more grown up now. He's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. Everybody in the town thinks he's crazy. Him and his family have moved away. He's coming back to see his nan. Oh, they spend too much time with the nan as well. The nan keeps going this idea. She's like, oh, meat's bad for you. Don't eat meat. Don't eat it. Don't eat this. Don't eat that. And nothing's good for you unless it's veggies and things like that. And he sees his nan, and she basically goes to meet this junk bloke. This junk bloke has found these eggs in the old abandoned barn that used to be the Browns family, Brad's family, because it's been abandoned since they left. For some unknown reason, the eggs haven't hatched. maybe it's an incubation, maybe it's cold in the barn where they were left, so they were never hatched, because when the guy gets the eggs, he leaves next to a heater and they start to like incubate and hatch. So that's where that comes from. Obviously, the whole town of Grover's having an Easter egg, sort of it's Easter, so they have an Easter egg hunt, Easter celebration. So the Nan, being none the wiser, she takes these eggs, paints them up, spreads them around the town, and as you would imagine, they started to hatch. And it was at this moment I was hoping, like, okay, they're all around. It's kind of, all I could think of was like eight-legged freaks, or like Gremlins. Better example, because Gremlins and Critters are kind of pretty much the same. I was kind of thinking, okay, they're spread around the town, chaos ensues. You're going to have like little short stories of little of people in the town, in the homes or at work, blah, blah, finding or hearing these things and being eaten. And that's what I was expecting. One by one, people are going to start dropping like flies. And then it was going to be the bigger picture where like these critters have expanded, have grown, and the bounty hunters are overwhelmed, and people have to hunker down and fight bare hands, and people getting bit up and killed and blah blah blah. And that this is what I was expecting for this movie. And now I'm talking about it, I generally feel like I've potentially ruined the movie for myself, because I was so hyped up and I didn't listen to my own rules of going expecting nothing and expecting and enjoying it for what it is, not for what I want it to be. And I wanted it to be one thing, and I'm bummed out because it wasn't that what I was hoping for. So possibly me personally, I've ruined it for myself. It's still good. It's just not what I was hoping for, and that is the issue, really. But anyway, so they do the Easter egg hunt, and the critters get out. The bounty hunters come down because there was a signal from their masters saying, like, you haven't dealt with the critters. They're still on Earth. You've got to go back. So they go back, and then sort of they get overrun because there's only two of them. There's more critters this time. And again, it's still that thing of like, okay, you've now got more critters. You've got more of them. Do more of them, but you don't do enough with them. And again, another sort of issue I have. And yeah, they just get overwhelmed. Lee sadly dies. He goes down swinging, or she goes down swinging technically, because it's a female form that Lee takes. And all that's left then is Charlie and Ugg. Ugg basically can't deal with the fact that Lee's gone, so he just changes back to being his kind of non-face self. It's literally just like, it looks like a rubber, it looks like an eraser, basically, on his head. And he's not consolable. He's just like defeated. So it's up to Charlie and Brad and the other people of the town to deal with this problem. And then from there, they try to, like I mentioned, they try to blow him up in a burger factory. Doesn't work. They turn into a big giant critter ball, and all that can save in the end. Well, you know what? I won't ruin the ending for you. It's all right ending. It's all right, But I've got to remind myself, the reason that we watch these movies is not to take them seriously. We are to watch them and enjoy them for what they are, which is cheesy, silly, comedy, horror, science fiction, thriller sort of films. And that's what this is at the end of the day. I just wish there was more in terms of the gore, of actually seeing the critters be critters, rip people to shreds, swear, be prolific, be creepy, disgusting, horrible, do everything like that. That's what I was kind of hoping for. But, there's a chance with Critters 3, I might have it. Might get it with Critters 4, might get it with Critters Attack, might get it with Critters Bounty Hunter, or Critters a new binge, or Critters all you can eat. Oh God, they made so many of these. I'm gonna have a lot of fun with this series, I can tell. But yeah, my overall thoughts with this movie is that even though I am disappointed that it wasn't the film that I was hoping it to be, for what it is and what it tries to do, it's okay. The first one's better. I will admit that. Me personally, I would rather watch the first one, but I would be fine to watch these as a double bill. To watch Critters 1, Critters 2 back to back, I wouldn't mind that at all. It wouldn't bother me. The practical effects is the best part of this movie, and it's the thing that I love about the Critters so much. It's just the fact of it. yes, you can see that you can tell that it's the 80s. You can tell that the practical effects aren't as good as what they are today. But for what they were and what they were able to do back in the day with the practical effects, it just makes this series even better. When you're seeing the critters, just they look like puppets, but you know what? It adds to the fun of it. When you can see them looking around like puppets, kind of like Thunderbird sort of style as they go like with the shoulders back, back and forth, or when they get into their little balls and they ride around, and I'm like, that's terrifying. You wouldn't think it, but a big sort of hedgehog ball thing spinning towards you and then jumping at you and then biting your jugular. It's terrifying. Now they have their little thorns in the back of their heads that paralyze you as well. They are a terrifying design. They're a terrifying creature. So that's good. But yeah, to me, it just falls to pieces, when you realize that the critters aren't doing what the critters would do. As soon as as soon as the critters find processed food, i.e. burgers, chips, brown sauce, red sauce, mustard, all that kind of stuff, once they found the processed stuff, it was basically the fact of, why are we bothering with humans? And that's how it felt. It felt as soon as they found the processed stuff, they stopped attacking the humans completely. The only reason they went to go attack humans is because they ran out of meat. And it wasn't until the meat storage place at the end basically comes available and they can smell it and they start getting attracted to it. That's when they just forget about humans completely, because humans don't have burgers are all meat. There's no bones. And the critters are like, fair enough. He makes a good point. And they just go to the burgers instead. And I'm like, no, focus on the people. Eat the people. Processed food's bad. I can't believe I'm saying this. It's a Critters movie. Processed food's bad for you. Go for the prime cut, the fresh meat. You know what I mean? Like, yes, there's bones, but eat around it. You know what I mean? Like, you're aliens, for God's sakes. I don't know why I'm getting so perplexed about it. Yeah, all I can say, because I'm going to repeat myself, is that I was just hoping for more. And maybe that's why I didn't enjoy it, is because I did something that I always say not to do, which is, enjoy it for what it is, not for what you want it to be. But I was looking for something that I want it to be, and I'm disappointed. So I'm my own worst enemy, I'm my own failings. But still, it's a good film. I can still recommend. So that is my overall thoughts. As for a bit of trivia before we wrap things up, so Mick Garris has wanted to get Frank Welker to do the voices of the critters, but he couldn't afford to get him, so he ended up doing most of the voices himself and hiring a loop group to provide additional vocals for them. That makes sense. I did wonder why the critters didn't talk much in this one. Not that they spoke a lot in the last movie, but they had a lot more grumbles, a lot more noises. They were a lot more sort of critterness, basically. Kind of like the Gremlins, like they don't always speak English, but you know what the grunts and what certain noises mean. And that's what we got in the first one. It's the fact of, you knew what certain voices meant and that sort of thing. So that makes sense as to why they don't talk very much. Next bit of trivia I've got. So New Line Cinema trademark. Lynn Schaer has a role. Lynn Schaer, the younger sister of the founder of New Line Cinema, Robert Schaer. She can be found in countless New Line films, including this one. Other examples include A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dumb and Dumber, and Critters, etc., etc. The props they use for the eggs are sugar apples. A cardboard cutout. Here you go. A cardboard cutout of Freddy Krueger appears in the film. Both Critters 2 and A Nightmare on Elm Street are New Line Cinema properties. This film was exclusively produced, by Robert Shane, the co-founder of New Line Cinema. David Towsley's first writing credit he got to pen Waterworld, G.I. Jane, and all the Chronicles of Riddick films. We also get Roxanne Cohen, the lady who Lee takes the form of, who gets to show her breasts off, who portrays Lee as the Playboy centerfold model, disguised bounty hunter, tragically passed away only a few short years after the film's release. She died in a car accident in March of 1993. She was only 32 years old. Now, the reason I wanted to bring that one up is because if you actually look at what she did, I was having a bit of a look because I was kind of interested because I recognised her face and I feel like I've seen it before. I have done. So she's most known for, because she was in Tango and Cash, she was in Critters 2, Phoenix the Warrior, and Not of This Earth. She was in other movies like Angel Free, Fatal Pulse. She was in a lot of like late 80s sort of horror sort of movies. And I knew why I recognized the face. I didn't know that she had passed away until I started doing my research. But yeah, I just wanted to bring it up as the fact of she did a fantastic job here. She doesn't have much words to say, mostly the fact of kill Kreitz, basically. But I just wanted to mention it here because I knew I recognized her face and I knew I'd seen her in some other films. I just didn't know that she'd passed away. So rest in peace, Roxanne Cohan. But yeah, so that is all we've got for trivia. Oh, Eddie Deazen's in it. Is that guy that got that voice? I can't do the voice, to be honest. Even if I tried, he's in every 80s movie. He's in Grease, War Games. He was the nerdy kid in Polar Express. He was in 1941. What else off the top of my head? He was in. Oh God, I'm trying to think. Oh, he's been in SpongeBob. He's done a voice work of SpongeBob. Trying to think what else he's been in. Basically, he was in all 80s movie. Like, if you watch an 80s movie, you knew this guy just by listening to his. Oh, he played Mandoc in Dexter's Laboratory and other things like that. And when he appears in this movie, I'm like, that's just classic 80s casting there. I don't know if he was famous at the time, but yeah, he was a classic 80s sort of nostalgia there for it. But yeah, so that is all she wrote really in terms of Critters 2. I do look forward to watching Critters 3. I do. I think it's set in Manhattan or it's set in New York. For some unknown reason in the 80s, all horror icons had to go to New York. Jason went to New York. I don't know who did Freddy go to New York? Did Michael Myers go to New York? I know Jason did. I saw that one. Bit of a strange film, that is. Good film. Wow. Yeah, it's all right. But I don't know what the fascination was in the 80s. Like, everybody had to go to New York. Even Home Alone, Kevin McAllister had to go to New York. It was just the place to be in the 80s for some unknown reason. But I am looking forward to watching the other Critters movies. I'm going to try my best when I do get around to watching Critters 3, which more than likely will be next Halloween. I'll try my best to go into it not expecting anything, of just enjoying it for what it is. More than likely, if I have a look quickly at where I just closed my tab. If I look quickly on here, open my tab back up. So Critters 3, where are you? Critters 3. By the looks of it, it's got... Oh, is that who I think it is? It's a little Leo. Little DiCaprio. Little DiCaprio was in this movie. Oh, that's got me interested. Little Leo. Little Leo. Sorry. It just reminded me of that scene from Austin Powers. He's like, Leo. I'm silly. I know. But yeah, so the Critters are in new. What's the storyline to this one? Let's have a look. In what appears to be a cross between Critters and the Towering Inferno, the residents of a shoddy LA apartment. Sorry, it's LA. It's not New York apartment block are chased up to the roof by hordes of hairy monsters, the Critters. Leonardo DiCaprio's feature film debut, only the sequel he's never appeared in, as the only sequel he's ever appeared in. Sorry, so this was the first movie he was in, and this was the first sequel he's ever been in. Oh wow! Oh, apparently they shot Critters 3 simultaneously with Critters 4. Wow. Oh, okay. That's cool. But yeah, little Leo's in it. Little Leo. What I was going to say before I realised Leonardo DiCaprio was in it was that the hope is the fact of whatever Critters 3 is going to be, they've got new characters. It's in the 90s, so sometimes past, potentially a bigger budget maybe or not, maybe a smaller budget. But the hope is whatever they do, they they focus more on the killing, on the death and that sort of thing. But a man can dream. A man can have his fingers crossed. We will see. But that'll be next Halloween that we watch Critters 3. And we'll see little Leo in action in his titular first career-shaping role, because we all know if it wasn't for Critters 3, he wouldn't have gone on to be Jack and died in the Titanic. We all know, even though he could have fitted on that board, but we're not getting there because we're not talking about Titanic today. But yeah, I've talked longer than I was planning on to. I was just trying to drag it out really because I really had hoped to have more to talk about this film than I did, but I feel like I'm just ranting at this point. So I'm going to reel it on back and try to wrap it up nicely. So thank you very, very much for listening. Next week, it's another surprise. I'm not going to talk about what it's going to be, but stick around because next week we're going to be starting our second Halloween special. It's another classic. It's another cult classic, B-movie horror. So hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully you like it. It'll be one that I've never seen before. So who knows? It might be better than Critters 2. It might be worse. We will see. But that's not the point of watching these movies. The point of watching these movies is to have fun. And I did have fun with this film. It was silly. It was stupid. It wasn't what I wanted it to be, but I still had a smile on my face on moments where I thought that was silly. That was funny. I loved it. And there was a lot of jokes in it, and for that, it gets a pass for me. It does get a pass. So hopefully you want to stick around for next week. If you want to check out my review of Critters 1, then by all means, please do. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's everywhere that you find my podcast. Just have to scroll down a bit to season 2, but it's there. Check that one out if you haven't listened to it. And check all the other ones that I did, like, the Killer Clowns from Outer Space, The Cottage, The Stuff. By all means, check them out. Hopefully you like them, enjoy them. Anyway, so I will see you all next week for the next episode. Thank you very, very much for listening. I've been your host, Luke the Ghoul. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye.